And so you have to be careful when you're, comparing something head to head to a chemical, an antibiotic, things of that nature, because you cannot expect, some of these things that we evaluate to even meet, the same standards as a chemical or an antibiotic. But that doesn't mean that it's not beneficial in some way to the bird. And so it's easy to forget that, because when you're looking at data, you can, you want something as effective. Well, that may not be realistic. But that doesn't mean it may not be beneficial.
Hello and welcome to the Poultry Podcast Show. Today I'm here with Dr. Danielle Graham. Welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm very excited to chat with you, hear what you have to say about some of the stuff that you're working on within your lab. But first, I want to hear, how did you get into the poultry industry?
Well, probably like many people, they think they want to go to vet school, right? And so during my undergrad, I started working with Billy Hargis and his group, and I started doing some research and had a number of projects. And so I fell in love with that. And so instead of vet school, I wanted to do graduate school. And so that led to doing my master's and then my PhD, all here at the University of Arkansas. And so I just really, really fell in love with, poultry diseases and specifically gut health, which led to my passion, which is parasitology. And so it just kind of all snowballed from, just becoming interested in one thing and then just kind of diving into it.
Natural Biologics is using cutting-edge science to dig deeper into the poultry health challenges you face. By gathering scientific evidence, they identify the most effective combinations of natural ingredients that improve animal health. Visit naturalbiologics.com/poultry to see the newest research in both turkeys and chickens.
I love that you have a passion for parasitology, because I think most people are just like, ew, that's a gross field. But I also think it's really interesting, but I for sure would not call myself a parasitologist. So I'm happy there are people there to tackle those other issues.
Well, I'm still learning, but I enjoy it. So.
Yeah. So what was your path then to your current position now?
Well, so while I was working on my graduate degrees, I was also a technician at the Poultry Health Lab with Billy Hargis's group. And so I was exposed to, designing experiments that, whether that be for students or for industry contracts or grant writing, things of that nature. And so that just kind of solidified what I thought I wanted to do. And I knew academia was really probably the best place for me, but it's highly competitive. And so I was realistic and knew that it was a long shot. My current position was Dr. Chapman's, and so it was open for 6 years. And it was just luck of the draw, I guess, that I applied and they, selected me for the position, but it definitely is a dream job. And so that's kind of why I'm here. I think it was just pure luck that they didn't hire someone before I had finished my PhD. So I'm very grateful.
That is awesome. Like, I'm so happy when people get their dream job. It makes your day-to-day a lot more fun.
I did apply to NASA and I got rejected, but it's still nice to have that rejection letter. So, but this is my realistic dream job.
Yeah. Oh, NASA. That would be an interesting place to have a job. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've been working on, or maybe some of where your passion lies in terms of the different diseases that you have been working on modeling?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do, with disease research is either utilize or develop challenge models that simulate what could be going on in a commercial setting, because we're working in pristine conditions. So we have to have some way to, reproduce these diseases. And so, probably 50% of what my group has been focusing on is Enterococcus cecorum research. and trying to replicate exposure to these virulent cecorum strains during the hatching phase specifically, and then looking at the development of that septicemia and mortality that's being observed within the first 2 weeks of life, instead of what is traditionally thought of with cecorum, which is, you're getting the skeletal phase involvement and things of that nature. So kinky back, right? So we're focusing more on that early, post-hatch phase. And then we work heavily with Histomonas meleagritis, and really going back and trying to recreate and understand the biology of Histomonas more. I feel like maybe we have skipped some steps. We've worked with attenuated vaccines. There are other groups that have done that as well. So highly passage strains of Histomonas where they've lost some of their virulence and vaccinating with those, but it's not feasible. So we're trying to find alternative ways to control that disease, right? Because we lost the one tool that we had, which was histostat, but arsenical-based drugs. And then work heavily with Eimeria, necrotic enteritis, things of that nature, and dabble in ORT and Clostridium septicum. And so, we're open to whatever the industry needs, but definitely our primary focus, is heavily on the Histomonas, Eimeria, and then Enterococcus cecorum side of things.
So what have been the hardest parts of those models to develop? Is it just that science is missing, or is it recreating the right conditions, to make it look like something actually that would happen in the field?
I think, recreating the right conditions and then picking, everything's going to be skewed, right? Because we're trying to develop this. It's not an artificial model, but it is, right? So using strains that may be too harsh. And so when you're trying to evaluate, some of these natural-based methods to potentially mitigate the disease, it's just, nothing is going to ever be able to control that. And, the type of model that we use. So we have either direct challenge, which is going to be quite more harsh or, a little more severe than a horizontal transmission model. But with horizontal transmission models, you have things with, you may be able to reproduce it 9 out of 10 times, but that one time that you can't explain it. And so you just have to repeat it. But with Histomonas specifically, I think the horizontal transmission model is a more realistic way to evaluate, maybe natural alternatives. So that's probably some of the, the hard things to do when you're working with these models.
So I know a little bit about Histomonas or blackhead, right? That's the common term. And I know that it affects turkeys a bit more than chickens. Is that still kind of the current state of affairs, or are you seeing a lot more issues in chickens?
So, just, word of mouth, hear things that some breeder flocks may have, more severe breaks than others, but that usually comes back to deworming. Or maybe a particular strain. Most of what our group does or, works with when it comes to Histomonas is with turkeys. And their immune response is quite different than, chickens to Histomonas. And so there has been some research, not by our group, but others, definitely showing that. But I still don't think we truly understand the biology of Histomonas and the, pathogenesis and to truly understand how the immune system really is differing between the two, but it is absolutely different.
Is the difference, does that cause the disease to be more severe in turkeys, or are they slower to respond, would you say? Or is that kind of one of the things that still needs to be elucidated?
Well, I think the innate response, I think that's been shown that is delayed in turkeys. But then the cytokine storm and things like that is leading to severe damage, and that's where you're getting that excessive mortality in turkeys that's 80 to sometimes 100%, and they just can't recover because they're either dying from severe typhlitis, depending on the strain of Histomonas, or severe hepatitis. And so there's no going back. The other issue is we don't understand how it transmits fully inside the turkey barns. And so that's another factor that is, it's confusing some of the things, for understanding of transmission and severity and how rapidly it transmits in a flock.
So when you're developing the models, especially for a disease like this that's got horizontal transfer, how important is the setting or recreating the ability for them to horizontally transfer? It seems like that could be the success or failure of the overall model.
Absolutely. And there are a couple of groups who have, been able to reproduce horizontal transmission in floor pens. However, I've had no success with that. And so we use a battery cage type model where we place papers in the cages, and that's where you get 9 out of 10 times you get horizontal transmission, and we're able to reproduce that. And so that's the model that we use. I think with the floor pen aspect and litter, horizontal transmission on litter, there's so many factors in that. And I don't know if, when someone is able to reproduce that, it's the diet they're using or the strain that they're using, or, the stage at which the histomonads were when they were administered to the birds, or density. There's so many factors, but we just haven't nailed those down to be able to, I would say, any of us consistently reproduce horizontal transmission in floor pens. You may get it once.
This sounds like a career-long project. So a good place for someone at the beginning of their career to be, because you've got plenty of work to do.
And that, vectors come into that in the field, and so really understanding that as well. I believe Dr. Beckstead's group looked into that. Sean Chen's group at Georgia had looked into that, and Rudiger Hawk. So there's other folks that have tried to look into it, but I still don't think we're fully there with the molecular techniques to truly understand all of it. So that's kind of our goal.
I often also feel like I'm being tripped up by not having the correct molecular techniques for the work that we do. I get you right there. So what have been some other sorts of models or projects that you've been developing or been working on? And I know they would be different than Histomonas, but maybe would still have some of the same challenges, I guess, as far as repeatability.
So I'll go to Enterococcus cecorum, because that's what we have a couple of models we've developed recently. And I would say that, maybe the downfall with those models is that if there is another Enterococcus species that, just naturally comes in with, the embryos that we use for those studies, that is going to, potentially impact the outcome. And that's affecting, reproducibility. So if you have an Enterococcus faecalis, we've seen where, our virulent cecorum strains, administering those during late embryogenesis seemed to benefit them because the faecalis appeared to be more virulent than the cecorum. And so I think that is a limitation with our models, but out of, the 5 or 6 times we've ran that, we've only had one instance where, we just had severe contamination with faecalis. But what do you do? And that's realistic. So, we take those studies out and try to understand how our cecorum strains are interacting with the faecalis, that's naturally coming in with the birds. And so that's definitely a factor. And then with Eimeria, more specifically necrotic enteritis, there's as you know, there's multiple challenge models, and so
Yeah.
and everyone has an opinion on which one, is best. But it all comes back to, we're all trying to reproduce the disease.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the way that we're doing it could be, with necrotic enteritis, it may be that, some may think the challenge model that we're using could be too severe, but the one that we particularly used was developed in the Hargis lab, and so it's a Salmonella challenged hatch followed by Eimeria maxima, which, depending on the strain of maxima that you use, could dictate the type of mortality that you'll see at the end once you have necrotic enteritis developing. So Salmonella typhimurium followed by Enterococcus, Eimeria maxima, and then Clostridium perfringens, of course. But other folks put Clostridium perfringens in the feed, or just only use, perfringens, or maybe they'll vaccinate use a Coccivac followed by some perfringens. And so I think we all have the same goal. It's to try to reproduce the disease so we can find alternative methods to control it, though. So
Yeah, I agree with you there. And sometimes it's just luck of the draw or luck of the birds you get on trial.
Exactly. But that's reality, right? And so
100%.
try to make the most of it and go with it and see if you can't learn something else from it.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think, just from a general perspective, some of other than the disease models that you mentioned right now, like what are the big things of interest right now in industry? I mean, industry has to be interested in these disease models because it gives them a route to test different interventions. But are they looking towards these diseases as they're going to be constant, or do they think that there's other things coming on the horizon, or is it just kind of everybody has their own interest and we all work on something?
Well, I mean, with Histomonas, there are no vaccines and there are no, available approved treatment options for that. So there absolutely needs to be something that they can use to, prevent or treat these flocks. Because, I mean, from a welfare perspective too, it's really sad that, there's almost nothing you can do except maybe some management practices that may have worked, and you think that maybe it's going to improve your livability or reduce severity of the disease. So with that one, I think that's why we're doing the research, is to find, some alternative. With Enterococcus cecorum or any of those hatchery-associated opportunistic pathogens, goes back to formaldehyde fumigation. At least in the U.S., that's what is still traditionally primarily used to, fumigate those hatch cabinets during late embryogenesis. And so formaldehyde is a carcinogen, right? And so not only from the animal aspect, but also the human perspective, we may be limited to how long we have formaldehyde as a tool. And so that's why we focus not only on the Enterococcus cecorum type models, but E. coli, mixed pathogen type models, so that some of these, folks who do think that they have something that could be an alternative to formaldehyde, we have a way to test that before they go into a commercial hatchery, head to head with formaldehyde. So we'll do that in the lab before commercial application. And so it's like a stepping stone, and I think it validates that, some of the things that are being tested could be alternatives, or maybe we need like a multifaceted approach. And so one of my students, he focuses on probiotic interventions during late embryogenesis. It's saying as an alternative to formaldehyde is quite bold. So that's why I say it's going to take multiple approaches. A probiotic is not a complete replacement for formaldehyde, but it can improve, performance and overall well-being for the chicks if used appropriately. So
the hope is at some point something could equal a chemical or equal an antibiotic, but in reality, or actually in practice, it's not equal. I mean, we know the mechanism of action, mode of action for those different things, and it's not it's not just even on the same playing field, right? They're just different. They can provide a benefit, but they're just different.
Exactly. And so you have to be careful when you're, comparing something head to head to a chemical, an antibiotic, things of that nature, because you cannot expect, some of these things that we evaluate to even meet, the same standards as a chemical or an antibiotic. But that doesn't mean that it's not beneficial in some way to the bird. And so it's easy to forget that, because when you're looking at data, you can, you want something as effective. Well, that may not be realistic, but that doesn't mean it may not be beneficial. So
yeah, I'm totally on board with that. Is there anything that you've worked on that was kind of like a surprise result, like unexpected? I know sometimes when we have unexpected results, those are our big discoveries, or other interesting outcomes or interesting places to follow up on.
Yeah, so we ran one study recently with we isolated turkey Eimeria from wild turkeys in the U.S. and then screened those for Anticoccidial sensitivity and then safety as potential vaccine candidates. And so we were running particularly an Eimeria meliagramidis strain through with and without a bioshuttle program. And so we still need to repeat the study, but we did see the bioshuttle program had, when compared to just vaccination alone with that meliagramidis strain, there was increased intestinal permeability, which, was interesting to me because, performance-wise and things of that, they were quite similar. But something was, is going on where, you may be interrupting cycling, developing immunity, not having an effect on performance, but perhaps we need to repeat the study, obviously, but there was some increased intestinal permeability. And so I don't know what that exactly means, but we were shocked. So, and so we're working to kind of, investigate that further.
Yeah. Hey, that can be a really cool key finding. You just got to figure out what it means.
Yeah, and it may not repeat, that's research,
Exactly.
But that was one of the ones in my mind that really stood out to us.
Yeah. So I know it's common, especially for the different Eimeria strains, to either isolate from, a production flock or a different source. But how did you isolate Coccidia from wild turkeys?
Well, there was a master student, so I was still working on my PhD at the time, but definitely helping lead this project. But a master student, he did all the legwork for this. His name's Aaron Ashcraft, but he contacted state agencies, wildlife folks, hunters. So he went to hunting websites. And man, I bet, 2019 and beginning of 2020, he probably sent out 50 to 100 kits. And then we just received random fecal samples from all over, the eastern, 2/3 of the U.S. And that was our 2020 project. So when I came here, we just continued that research, and it's been a whirlwind. But we went from, I think, 100 different isolates and then ran those through Anticoccidial sensitivity testing because we didn't want to move forward if they were resistant to single oocyst isolation, which is extremely tedious. I mean, you fail more than you win on that. And then we isolated 5 species that were, vaccine candidates that we're still evaluating. So that was a group effort, and and Aaron did a lot with that. And so it was a lot of legwork to get those, a lot of poop samples too, but that's.
Yeah. I can imagine the pure excitement of, a hunter, someone who was able to collect a fecal sample from a turkey, maybe contributing to a vaccine in the future. Like, that would be quite exciting if you knew that you were the person that collected that sample.
Right. And so, yeah, we kept everything tracked so we know, where they came from. And so most of the ones, interestingly, that we use were from Maine or Delaware. But it makes sense that, there's not really any turkey production up in that area. So the isolates that we had more, closer in Pennsylvania and Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, I mean, a lot of those were resistant to something, and so it didn't pass the test.
That is really interesting. That's really interesting data that you found some resistance in the wild turkey populations.
Yeah, and mainly around where commercial turkey operations are ongoing. So they're exposed to, as not directly but indirectly, I guess, exposed to some of those partially resistant strains at least.
Yeah, because from litter and other application, you can kind of share between wild turkeys and wild turkeys and the captive turkeys, if you will.
I like that. Yeah, captive and wild.
Exactly. Before we wrap up today, is there anything else that you want to mention about any of the topics that we talked about?
No, we talked about the challenge models and, the headache that comes along with that, but how we use those for tools. No, I think, that was important and what I think people need to hear about, what we're trying to do. So,
but it's really exciting. I love people who spend their time focusing on models because then everybody moves forward when we know more information.
Yeah, I enjoy it. So.
One of AB Vista's core strategies is to give customers the flexibility to do more with less, which is a common theme among many companies and producers in today's industry. As a science-driven company, AB Vista has proven results to help our customers achieve optimal performance using customized programs with our core phytase and xylanase. It's time for our famous three. A worldwide leader in animal nutrition, Adiceo's portfolio of products includes methionine, the full range of vitamins, enzymes, organic selenium, probiotics, mycotoxin management strategies, and palatability products. With such a diverse offering, Adiceo supports its customers with a broad range of expertise, tools, and services to help them maintain a competitive advantage. Adiceo, fueling predictable profits. To learn more, visit Adiceo at www.adiceo.com.
So to wrap up our chat today, I want to ask you the three questions that we ask all of our guests. And the first question is, what is a favorite poultry resource?
The avian immunology books that come out every so often. There was a new one recently. I'm not an immunologist. A lot of the things we do requires some knowledge of immunology, and so I refer to that often, and also, my students do as well. So
that
would
I love that book. I like the physical book too. The physical book, not the online.
I need to get the physical book because it's different holding a book than it is trying to scroll through a PDF. So.
Oh gosh, I agree. The second question is, what is a favorite non-poultry resource?
So if we're on books, Essentialism. I don't know if you've read that book.
I haven't.
Well, I'll tell you the gist of it. You should still read it, but it is what it sounds like. It's saying no to things. A lot of us are inclined to say yes because we never want anyone, to make anyone upset, or we want to fulfill everyone's request. And so I've referred to that book often and read it many times. It's, try to not get pulled in too many directions, even though they're all exciting. Say no in a way that, you feel is appropriate if you need to, or explain why you can't fulfill the request at that time, which is so hard, especially in academia, when these problems are coming to you and you want to tackle them all, but you have to be realistic. And so that's a great book, I think, for anyone to read.
Yeah, I'll have to put it on my list.
It's an easy, quick read. So
Oh, good. Love that. So the last question is what is your best advice for somebody who wants to get into the poultry industry and be successful?
oh, well, I would say, figure out what you're passionate about. And so whether that is, if you're going through college, go talk to different professors and see what you'd like, or internships, things like that. Figure out what you're going to be passionate about and then pursue that after your degree. If you're someone who's not going to college, I mean, see if there's a company where you can rotate between different sectors within that company. I know Simmons does that. And students love that when they come out of here and they get to, if they get a job and they go in this rotational program. I don't know exactly what it's called, but I know that they go, hatchery, all through every part of production. And so, so that they place you where you're, going to fit best.
Yeah.
And so I think, refer to the folks around you, especially those that have experience, and just, do as much as you can and figure out what you want to do. Don't let someone else sway you.
That's great advice. Sometimes hard though if you're saying yes all the time, right?
Yes. Yes. That's right.
Ironically, I have a random unrelated question. Do you keep a Christmas tree in your office year round? Or are you just very proactive and ahead of the game this year?
Yes, I keep it year round, and I typically have a small one at home year round. And I'm telling you, if you're having a bad day, plugging that Christmas tree in, I don't know what it does, but it makes a difference. And so that's just one of the little quirks that I get made fun of constantly for. But
I love that.
it makes you happy. So I mean,
yeah,
I'm also
I agree.
7 feet tall.
Oh,
Yeah, so I'm a little. Yeah, it's quite tall, so I would have to get some help, and so I also don't want to burden someone to help me take it down. So we're just gonna keep plugging it in when I'm having a hard day. So
yeah, you roll with that, you enjoy it. I'm on board with you.
You should put one up. So
I should. Well, thank you again for telling us about your work and some of the cool things that you're doing. This was quite a fun talk for me to hear about what you're doing down in Arkansas.
No, I enjoyed it. And yeah, so thank you for taking the time to talk with me too. And I had a blast.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll chat soon.
Yes, of course.